Shanghai has quite a few fancy historical buildings from its colonial past, but you can also find these old apartments that don't look oriental. They were built by the Jews.
Shanghai was a major refuge for Jews who had to flee their homes during World War II. It's a story that's not often told.
Jews have lived in exile for a long time, all over the world. Shanghai, Brooklyn, and they've managed to make a go of it.
Let's start from the beginning.
In 1842, China lost the Opium War and signed the Treaty of Nanking with the UK. Then the colonial powers created settlements in parts of Shanghai. Over the following few decades, two groups of Jewish people came: the Russian Jews and the Baghdadi Jews. The latter were successful traders, but what made them super rich, though, was real estate.
In the early 20th century, British-born Jewish tycoon Victor Sassoon built this Art Deco-style building, now known as the Peace Hotel. It was considered a skyscraper at the time, and over the years, it's been a meeting place for the elites, from George Bernard Shaw, Charlie Chaplin, to U.S. Army General George Marshall. This room belonged to Sassoon himself. This street has been one of Shanghai's most crowded commercial districts for the past century. It was developed by Jewish businessman Silas Hardoon.
The Jewish tycoons were enjoying their heydays in Shanghai, but nightmare was looming in Europe. At the 1938 Evian Conference in France, most countries refused to accept Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. The situation was dire.
But then a rumor started in Vienna about a place where you didn't need a visa to enter, and that glimmer of hope was Shanghai.
In 1937, the city of Shanghai was lost to Japanese invaders. And as local government agencies fell apart, there was no passport control anymore. Many Jews in Europe saw an opportunity. They decided to take luxury cruise ships from Europe to Asia. But there was one final obstacle. Although you didn't need a visa to enter Shanghai, you still needed one to buy cruise tickets to leave. He Fengshan, who was then Chinese Consul General in Vienna, decided that he couldn't sit by. He disobeyed his superiors by issuing some 2,000 visas to Jews for them to leave Austria. In the 2 years following 1937, some 20,000 Jews fled to Shanghai. Many of them used whatever money they'd left to get on the cruise ships after the Nazis froze their assets. 3 weeks of good food, drinks, and music on the ships were probably the last carefree joy they had before the years of struggle in Shanghai.
My feelings were it was going to be a great trip. I was going to go on a big ship. I'd never been on a ship. You know, that's how kids think.
When they stepped out of their ships, many were horrified. Every day on the streets, there were Chinese people either starved or frozen to death or killed by Japanese soldiers.
The environment was tough, but the Jewish tycoons got to work. Many of their real estate projects, like this one, came in handy as refugee shelters.
The local arm of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, or the JDC, also provided accommodations in the area.
The Chinese were very friendly to us. They were very, very nice. And I think they realized that we were being subjugated also.
The Jewish refugees found themselves in a totally different culture. Poverty and disease were also rampant. But with outside support, they lived better than most of their Chinese neighbors. Gradually, they formed a lively community with schools, sports teams, newspapers, and even rooftop bars. Now, all these were happening under the eyes of the occupying Japanese army, who were on Germany's side. So you might wonder, what did they think about this influx of Jewish refugees? Well, they didn't bother the Jews too much because in the late 1930s, Japan didn't want to antagonize America, which had the largest Jewish population. But that changed when Pearl Harbor happened.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The Pacific War began in December 1941. The Japanese in Shanghai had no more reasons to make nice with the UK and America and straight up took over the international settlements. no more Jews were allowed into Shanghai. The prospect for the refugees took a nosedive. Many rich Jewish businessmen were arrested and locked up in internment camps, and the aid from America's JDC was cut off almost completely. The community's main supports were down. To make matters worse, German Gestapo agent Joseph Meisinger, who was known as the Butcher of Warsaw, came to Shanghai in 1942. Rumors circulated in the Jewish community that Germans had pressured Japan to deal with them.
And said, put them on ships to sea without food or water, or just shoot them.
Between doing nothing and a straight-up Holocaust, the Japanese decided to choose a middle ground. In February 1943, the army forced all Jews in Shanghai into a 3-square-kilometer area in Hongkou district. That became known as the Shanghai Ghetto.
But it wasn't like a concentration camp. There were no barricades around the area. The Jews were living among the Chinese and could go out with a Japanese-issued permit. A Japanese official named Goya was in charge of handing out these passes, and it was said that he was quite insecure about his height. Story has it that he would get so angry when some Jewish applicants were so much taller than he was, he would hop on his desk and slap the people in the face while proclaiming himself the King of Jews. But other than that, the Japanese didn't bother the Jews too much when they crossed this bridge to the other areas. It wasn't the same for the Chinese locals though. The Japanese soldiers would harass them every day with their bayonets and cigarette butts.
By this time, the Jews in Shanghai were living by the day, and starvation had become a real possibility. Things got even worse when Americans started bombing Japanese troops in Shanghai in 1945. The sound of B-29 jets was a constant reminder that they could become collateral damage.
That continued until one day when people noticed a surreal quietness outside, and as they went out and checked, they found that the soldiers were gone.
Japan surrendered in August of 1945. Shanghai was liberated. But it was only when the Red Cross put out a list of surviving families of European Jews that those in Shanghai knew what transpired there.
So what happened at the end? Well, after World War II ended, China plunged into a civil war.
Many of Shanghai's Jews left to join their relatives in countries like America and Canada. And the newly founded State of Israel took in most of the rest.
So forever Shanghai will be associated in Israel, in the Jewish mind, as a shelter place for Jews.
Consul General He Fengshan died in 1997. And 3 years later, he was honored posthumously by the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel and awarded the title of Righteous Among the Nations.
我是上海犹太难民纪念馆馆长陈简，在我两边的是记载了二战时期在上海避难的18578位犹太难民的名字的名单墙。到目前为止，我们已经收到了1000件组珍贵的文物史料，大多数是来自于犹太难民本人以及他们的后裔，美国的，有澳大利亚的，有南美的，来自于世界各地。这件婚纱呢，是现在生活在美国的贝蒂女士在2013年捐给我们的。贝蒂女士在上海避难的时候她的婆婆呢为她缝制了这件婚纱。战争结束以后，她一共有3位女儿，其中2位女儿呢也是穿着妈妈的这件婚纱结婚的。
Today, the Jewish Tycoons projects still stand as some of the most popular attractions in Shanghai. These apartments in Hongkou district are a testament to the Jewish community's history in this city. This used to be the home of America's 46th Treasury Secretary, Michael Blumenthal.
I was 13 when I came and 21 when I left. So all the years of growing up and becoming a man were spent here in Shanghai. So I remember the good times and the bad times. I learned that in the bad times you have to fight and you shouldn't give up, and that you can play a role in building a bigger world and a better world.